World of Warships is old enough at this point that we're starting to see some power creep. And there's only a few ships that are really egregious and horrible examples of that, Petropavlos being one of them. But what that means is, potentially, you shouldn't be playing the older ships in the game. But at Battleships, I think that's not true. I think you still should be looking to get the Yamato and Montana, and today I'm going to show you two really solid games, at least the highlights from them. These ships are great, given that they don't rely on gimmicks. They're just a great base to launch a good game from. You're going to be pretty solid in most situations you want your battleship to be in. Yamato, of course, does rely a little bit on that overmatch, allowing you to go through a lot of armor in the game, even up to battleship plating, at least the front, bow, and stern. I think that a lot of times, these newer gimmicky ships are actually worse than the old standard or more vanilla style ships, because they try to go too far in some of these gimmicks. Incomparable is obviously the most recent example that's just on my mind, where I just really didn't like that ship, even though it has a ton of incredible and really strong gimmicks, like it having cruiser concealment and 508mm guns. But I just didn't find it tanky enough, and the guns were too inconsistent. Yamato and Montana, of course, well, they didn't have to try and find a niche. All they had to be was good battleships in the original game, and that's what makes them so great even now. They're just solid ships. So that's why I think if you don't have them, you should definitely look at getting them if you want to play battleships at tier 10. They're just so nice to have, where you don't feel like you're looking to take advantage of a gimmick. You're just looking to maximize the potential of a battleship on your team. So the Yamato, of course, has the incredible strength of the legendary or unique upgrade, which gives it even better accuracy, which can be used to still do really good damage to destroyers. It also helps it at extremely long ranges to make use of its guns. I think that 9 guns is a little bit low for tier 10, but given that these shells are so powerful, it's kind of okay. There's arguments to be made for sure in running the reload mod. Having more DPM is quite nice as well. I just prefer the increased accuracy and consistency. The other nice thing about Yamato, of course, is the shell velocity and how the shells don't really lose speed in the air. Some of the lighter guns that you get at tier 10, let's say the Bourgogne with 380mm guns, the shells lose a lot of speed in the air, whereas Yamato doesn't as much. So it's going to be really consistent throughout, even to these really long ranges, where we're hitting some pretty solid shots out to 20-25 kilometers. Even when you get bad dispersion, sometimes these shells even can go your way, given that they're so big and do so much damage. Overall, I don't think there's any worry about power creep for the Yamato, simply because of its overmatch. It's really difficult to have a bad time in Yamato, given that it's going to be doing reasonably good damage at any angle on almost any ship, thanks to that overmatch. It's just very consistent because of that. And that's great news, because we don't have to worry too much about power creep then, making this ship feel a little bit obsolete. And overall, I would honestly say Wargaming does a pretty solid job of not introducing too many new ships that are power creeping the old ones. I think there are definitely some examples, don't get me wrong. There are some issues with a lot of the ships that come into the game, but it's not like every new ship is the must-have and completely obsoletes the old ones. There are some, but for the most part, they do a reasonable job. And I think Yamato is never ever going to be a bad one. So if you don't have it, you should definitely look at grinding it out if you're looking for that tier 10 that's pretty good at sniping and you can't get your hands on a ship like Slava. And in fact, I usually prefer playing Yamato over something like a Slava because of the overmatch and overall shell damage. The Slava has that dispersion advantage, shell velocity advantage, but it requires broadsides, and it doesn't have the shell damage, where it only does like 12,000 damage per shell. which is why I still consider Yamato to be one of the best sniping battleships in the game, and I'm really never sad to see one on my team. I think they're probably going to do reasonably well. At least the ship won't be holding them back. Onto the Montana. This one I go back and forth on how power crept it's been. Of course, 406mm guns are pretty small for tier 10 these days, given how much more 30mm armor we see, and that this ship really doesn't have gimmicks to carry it, like these newer ones. But having a ship that is this tanky just allows you to play so aggressive and to support your team. Of course, having 12 guns that are pretty accurate helps as well. Since this Alabama is going broadside at 18 kilometers, we didn't quite lead enough on that first shot. Well, it's unlikely you're going to get away with 2 broadside salvos to a Montana. And there's our first kill. That's what we love to see in a battleship. And that's what makes Montana so great, the consistent 12-gun performance against broadside ships. It's really going to do well in a lot of different situations, which is why you see it so often in the more competitive areas like Kings of the Sea, because it's just so valuable to have a flexible ship that can push in and tank if need be. Having 2 of these cross-firing the same target from across the map also reduces the dependence on overmatch, where somebody is going to be getting a broadside shot. And when people go broadside, they tend to die when they face a Montana. That's back-to-back dev strikes. That's a pretty good start. And now with everyone pretty much gone from this flank, we're able to push in to C and support our team. And that's really, really nice on a map like this, where you're going to just be gifted broadsides. As soon as you're able to push through a flank, it's pretty much guaranteed you're going to get some really, really nice salvos in across the map. Not everyone is going to go your way, of course. This Georgia is going to get away with not really taking too much damage from our Montana. But we have more pressing concerns than somewhat poor dispersion. And that's that I'm pushing into what looks like 2 destroyers and one of the new Pan-Asian cruisers, which, if you didn't know, have long-range deep-water torpedoes that do a ton of damage, and smoke and HE. So it's like a Smolensk if they gave it deep-water, long-range, highly damaging torpedoes. So pretty scary to be pushing into this. And yet, Montana's going to be just okay here. We're not going to do amazingly, but we're not going to die, surprisingly. And that is the power of this ship, not dying. And a battleship that doesn't die and refuses to die quickly is very, very useful, assuming your teammates can give you a little bit of support. This Kitakaze gets spotted by the Shima. He also left his AA on, so he goes down, and we get our 3rd kill of this match. Getting quite lucky, I think, to not take a flood from the Onlin here. But honestly, this ship has pretty decent torpedo protection, and tier 8 DD torps aren't going to do too much to us here. Harlem gets a double fire, but Montana has this special heal. I guess that might be the gimmick of this ship, that it gets extra healing. Not Conqueror levels, but the heals can heal back up to 23,000 HP with the build I'm running. That's a lot, and enough to actually out-heal a double fire. So this ship is really, really tough to kill and has some pretty accurate, consistent guns. That's what makes it so good, and why I think you should still look at getting it, even though on paper it looks like one of the worst tier 10 battleships, near the Kurfürst levels for the worst tier 10 battleship. But it really isn't. I have a lot of really good games in this ship, simply because it's such a reliable, tanky platform. But the main reason I wanted to talk about these 2 ships was about the power creep. Do you guys think that there's extreme power creep in this game? Or if just every once in a while Wargaming releases a new ship that's just a little bit too good? I'm personally, I think, in the second camp, where every once in a while they mess up and release a ship like the Petro, and most of the time they're coming up with ships that don't actually break the meta. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'd be very curious to see which ships that are new have really power crept a lot of the old ones, or if the new gimmick just seems strong initially, and then when you get to play the ship, it's really not as good as you think. Since these ships really don't rely on gimmicks, you can run the standard battleship captain. And what does that mean? It means this right here: fire prevention, concealment, and extra healing. Taking basic survivability, again, to reduce fires and to survive, and then adrenaline rush to hopefully deal a little bit more damage. The tier 1 and tier 2 skills can be almost whatever you want to. It's really these last couple that really make these ships shine. And honestly, those are the builds that I run on both the Montana and Yamato. And the upgrades are very similar as well. Concealment, tankiness, and as much accuracy as you can get. Of course, Montana is going to run the Special American Dispersion upgrade in the 6th slot, which really helps it get those devastating salvos. But that's going to be the Montana and Yamato. Certainly not power crept and very much worth playing in 2022. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.